So each of us is a manifestation of impermanence interacting with itself. And the fact of impermanence is one of the central sort of starting places for Buddhist teaching. So I thought I would naturally talk about stability because I don't know about you, but as long as I can remember, I've yearned for a sense of stability, for things to be kind of settled and predictable, and even just to have a stable sense of who I am and what I'm supposed to do, continuity. And, that yearning for stability in a reality that is instability, is a source of suffering. And the first noble truth, which is usually translated as life is suffering, kind of points to that instability and that tension between wanting things to be stable and a reality that isn't. But it's not really apparent in the sort of standard translation of the Pali word for dukkha, that's usually translated as suffering, which is dukkha. So usually we think about First Noble Truth as life is suffering. But I've been curious lately about I'm always curious about words, and I've been really curious about the Pali word for suffering and some of the other Pali words that are the roots for the other words we use when describing the Four Noble Truths. So dukkha can be translated as suffering. It can also be translated as unsatisfactoriness. But the sort of most literal translation of dukkha is standing unstable. So, if you think about it that way, life is standing unstable. One of the things I love about language, and I think is so interesting about language, is especially, words and symbols that are used to describe private experiences, the thoughts and feelings and sensations and memories and associations that we all individually are aware of, but we can't sort of see directly in other people. So they're private. Words that are used to describe sort of inner experiences they're metaphors. And usually they are metaphors that are borrowed from things that are observed in the outside world. So another example of this would be like depression. So, a depression is like to push down, like a hole in the ground. And if you've ever been in a place where you've been depressed, it can feel just like everything is sort of pushed down and suppressed. So this sense of suffering or unsatisfactoriness, it's kind of interesting to think about that as sort of a reaction to standing unstable as reality. Even the term unsatisfactoriness, if you kind of look at the Latin for that, um, the two root words when put together mean something like to make enough. So when you're satisfied, it's like, oh, got enough, good. So we want to make it enough. And if we make it enough, then maybe we can just settle and we can sort of feel like things are okay. But if life is standing unstable, if life is wobbling, then it's like, how do you how do you stop? How do you make it enough? And the more you struggle against that, the more desperate you're going to feel, the more you're going to notice that it's not working, and you might think you need to try harder, or there's something wrong with you, or you just haven't found the right thing, and maybe circumstances aren't right. And so, the more we try to feel stable inside of this instability, the more unstable we get. Architecturally, if you think of like big buildings, if they're actually designed to wobble, and like the taller they get, the more that's important, because wind is going to push them around. And if you design a really tall building in a way that's using really rigid materials, it's going to crack and probably fall over. So the architects have sort of figured something out that I think our ancestral teachers have been trying to like get us to see for ourselves for a long time. And that's uh, if you're looking for stability, as in like you're going to stop the instability, then you're going to suffer. We need to find another way. So when I was thinking about dukkha as standing unstable, it reminded me of two things. One is, I once heard a yoga instructor talk about um, instability in certain postures. So if you've ever done tree pose, you're balancing on one leg, a lot about standing unstable. And this yoga instructor was talking to someone in class who was kind of frustrated that they couldn't hold tree pose for very long. And the yoga instructor said, can you just allow falling out of the pose to be part of the pose? Because it is. We all kind of, even if you appear very stable in tree pose, you're just wobbling the whole time. Also reminded me of one of my favorite songs growing up, and still one of my favorite songs, from a band called Garbage. And the name of the song is When I Grow Up. And the chorus of it is, when I grow up, I'll be stable. When I grow up, I'll turn the tables. And if you like look into those lyrics a little bit, there's all sorts of really common assumptions and frankly delusions that probably most of us carry around with us about what it means to not suffer. So when I grow up, I'll be stable. So the idea that there is some stability developmentally that we're going to find. And actually growing up and being an adult means that you will be this sort of like stable being regardless of what's happening. And if you're not stable, it means you haven't grown up yet. So there's also like this connection between not being stable and kind of like being immature or incompetent. And then there's this idea that if you just keep working at it and maturing, you're going to get there. And the first noble truth really kind of just throws a wrench in that. It's like, well, actually, life itself is standing unstable. It doesn't matter how old you are, how mature you are, how much you develop. First noble truth is the first noble truth. So the second noble truth, which points towards the cause of suffering, is often translated as the cause of suffering is attachment or desire. So sometimes it's the cause of suffering is desire. More accurately, cause of suffering is attachment. But the Pali word that is translated as desire or attachment is upudana. Actually, the word for desire is moha. So really, it's upudana is the cause of suffering. Desire are just the things that come up. So upudana can also be translated as grasping, or more literally, fuel. So if the cause of suffering is fuel, like fueling our desires, especially fueling our desire for stability, for things to be not painful, not uncertain, or to be pleasurable, like it starts to make a little bit of a sense of like why struggling against instability, why trying to find the sense of permanence is the cause of our suffering. Because reality isn't like that. Reality is constant wobble, not trying to make yourself not wobble. Nirvana, the third noble truth, means to blow out or to stop fueling. Stop fueling what? Well, it's not that you stop the wobble, it's you stop trying to stop the wobble. So, maybe there is some stability, but the stability is instability. You know about this when you sit zazen. You've experienced this where you're sitting with your spine straight in stillness, and you might look really still from the outside, but inside there's all these like wobblings happening. And it's not about like stopping and being a statue. It's it's just being the wobble. Being a being that is a manifestation of impermanence interacting with itself. So it's a little bit, I think, more straightforward to practice that when we're in zazen posture, because you know we're not moving. We don't have other things to attend to. There's not a job that we need to do. We're just able to sort of sit and let go. When we're off the cushion, it can seem trickier than that because the wobbles are maybe a little bit more, the amplitude's higher. There's things that can happen. So a thing that I've been kind of playing around with lately, and I'll invite you to maybe try this out in your own experience, is in the midst of some of those big wobbles off the cushion, I've been actually just following Okamura Roshi's advice about how to practice shikantaza. And he breaks it down into 4 pretty simple, straightforward aspects. One is to sit up straight with your spine straight. So, I'm off the cushion and feel pretty wobbly, or I notice I'm like hunching. I'll just like straighten up my spine up to start with, see what that's like. His second instruction is to breathe softly into the belly. So I often notice that when I'm in the midst of some pretty big wobbles and maybe resisting them, my breath tends to be up here, shallow. So I'll just straighten my back and just breathe into the belly a little bit. His third instruction is to keep your eyes open. And this seems like just about, staying awake, but it's more than just staying awake. It's staying connected to the world around you. I notice when I'm in the midst of big wobbles and resisting them, I kind of get pulled inside and I'm not really here anymore. So remembering to keep my eyes open and to connect with what's happening to me and to engage with that with my back straight, breathing into my belly helps me to stop resisting the wobble so much. And then lastly, opening the hand of thought. And the first noble truth And the second noble truth really point towards that sense of we hold on to these ideas about what's happening and who we are and how it should be and how the world should be and all that. And it's really kind of grasping for stability in the midst of a wobble. So almost invariably, when I feel like I'm resisting a wobble, once I've got my back straight and I've started to notice my breath in my belly a little bit, my eyes are open, I also start to notice that I have grabbed onto some idea. And so if you can just let go of that idea and just come back to back straight, eyes open, breathing and wobbling, you might just notice what that's like versus resisting the wobbles. So when you grow up, maybe you'll be stable. I don't know if it works like that. I think it's, like that yoga instructor said, maybe, I'll adapt what they said about, falling out of the pose can be part of the pose. Maybe uh, instability is actually an essential part of stability.